Alright, so this is going to be part C, when you add more than the equivalence point. So in this case, you'll have to look at the question yourself. It says when you add 26 mils of NaOH, or base, the concentration of it is 0.3. Now, when you're adding more than equivalence point, this step is actually very easy. All you need to do is worry about how much more you're adding. So for example, we know that the equivalence point is 25 mils, and we're adding 26 mils. So for this case, we are adding exactly 1 mil extra. Now 1 mil of what are we adding? Well, we're adding 1 mil, we're adding base, right? So volume of OH is equal to 1 mil. Well, what's the concentration? Concentration is 0.3. So how much moles of OH are we adding? So that's the first thing you need to calculate. So the moles of OH that we're adding, in this case because we're adding strong base, is the volume in liters times the concentration in moles per liter, and it'll give you, so the moles of OH we added was 3 times 10 to the negative 4. Now we've added this much moles. Now we can calculate how much concentration we have actually in the flask of OH. Well, we know the moles of OH in the flask is this much, and the total volume is, well, 25 from the original and 26 because we added 26, so total volume is 51. So really, concentration is just moles over volume, which is just the moles of the OH added divided by total volume, which is 5.88 times 10 to the negative 3. So this number is actually the concentration of OH. Simple as that. And once we know the concentration of OH, well, then we just find POH, which is negative log that number, which is 2.23. And then pH is just basically 14 minus that number, which is 11.77. And if you check your book, that answer is correct. So in summary, all I'd like to say is that in the last part is just drawing. So hopefully you guys can do that yourself. You just have to make a table and just draw the curve. Anyways, what I want to say was there's really 3 really easy parts in it. If this is a 5-part question, A to E, the easiest part is the first part, which is initial. That is just a simple ice table. You just go and do it, and I'm sure all of you guys know how to do that. Second easy part is when you're adding half of the equivalence point, because then all you need to do to calculate pH is negative log of the Ka or Kb. Third easiest part is when you're going past the equivalence point. Because see, in these 3 points, we really don't need to do like ice tables, well, except for the first one, but the first one is a very easy ice table. When you're adding half of the equivalence point, you don't do an ice table, and when you're going above the equivalence point, you don't do an ice table. All you do is calculate the moles of OH added, then divided by the total volume, and that's your concentration of OH. And then that's it. Negative log of that will give you POH, and then pH is 14 minus that number. So I hope you understand. So we literally, in a 5-part question, 3 of them are very easy. So if you can't get, like, say for example B or the volume at equivalence point, because those ones are a little longer, you should be able to get at least part A. If they ask for half of the volume when you add half of the equivalence point, if they ask for that, if they don't, then you can't really get marks for that. But you should be able to skip to the end and get the marks for the past the equivalence point, because really you don't need any information in the middle, because each of these parts is like a question on its own. You really don't need any previous information to do any of the part. You can literally do part C without knowing part A. So like I said, so you should be able to do at least the initial part, which is just calculating pH without adding any base or acid, and then the equivalent half of the equivalence point, because it's negative log, and then when it's above the equivalence point, where you just care for how much more volume you're adding than the equivalence point. Remember, to calculate the equivalence point is very easy. I suggest you can do that in the very beginning step. I think it was in part 2 of the video where I do that, yeah. So you can refer back to that if you forgot how to calculate the volume needed for equivalence point. Alright, thank you. Good luck on your quizzes.